September 2024, Morocco, Tata Province. The morning of September 7th in the village of Igmir was no different from thousands before it. The sun rose over the anti-Atlas ridge with merciless precision. Old men drove goats onto scorched slopes. Women carried water in clay jugs along narrow, cracked paths. The air smelled of dust and heated stone. The village stood 8 hours from Marrakesh and 6 years deep into a brutal drought. The country's reservoirs were filled to less than 28% of capacity. The land had waited so long for rain that people had almost forgotten how to fear it. But it was on this quiet morning, at 1,000 meters above sea level, that something appeared on the horizon that no one here had seen in half a century. The sky was slowly changing color, not towards sunset, towards something else, towards something that had no name in the local languages. Thousands of kilometers to the northwest, over the cold waters of the Atlantic Ocean, an anomaly was being born. Meteorologists at Morocco's General Directorate of Meteorology were logging data with growing unease. An extratropical cyclone was forming along a pattern no one had expected to see in early September. Systems of this type are born over temperate latitudes. They move north toward Europe. They do not move south. They do not enter the Sahara. But this cyclone was breaking every known law of atmospheric mechanics. It stretched toward the equator like a giant pump, drawing moist air up from the depths of tropical Africa. Meteorologist Hussein Ouabeb, studying the satellite images, spoke a sentence his colleagues would remember for a long time. He said, "In 30 to 50 years, we have never seen this much rain in such a short period of time." The models showed the impossible. Zones of the Sahara that receive less than 25 millimeters of precipitation per year were about to absorb a month's worth, in some places an entire year's worth, within 2 days. But the warnings moved too slowly. The infrastructure of the mountain villages of the anti-Atlas had historically been the country's weak point. Roads here were single-lane, communications were unstable, and early flood warning systems in the ravines simply did not exist. The residents of Igmir and the neighboring village of Aoukhada received no warning. None. At all. By the evening of September 7th, the sky above the ridge finally broke open. The first drops were heavy, large, strange. Old-timers stepped out of their homes and looked at the sky with an expression that was difficult to put into words. It was a mixture of astonishment, joy, and that nameless fear that lives deeper than instinct. The rain intensified. Within an hour, it had become a wall of water. The dry wadis, riverbeds that had not seen flow in decades, began to wake. At first, it was a quiet whisper of water among the stones. Then a rumble. Then a roar. The soil of the Sahara does not know how to absorb water. Millennia of drought had hardened the ground to the consistency of asphalt. Water does not soak in. It slides. It gathers speed. It collects into flows that within minutes become rivers. Rivers without banks. Rivers without warning. Rivers that appear from nowhere and sweep away everything in their path.
Get out!
This was exactly what was happening in the ravines of the anti-Atlas on the night of September 7th to 8th. A liquid wall several meters high was racing down the wadi bed at a speed no human being could outrun. The village of Igmir was sleeping. 10 people from that small mountain settlement never woke up. The torrent came at night, without the sound that gives enough warning to react. It came as a wall of mud, rocks and water churned into one roaring mass. Houses built from mud brick are not designed for this. They did not collapse. They dissolved. Those who survived described what happened in identical terms. You simply wake up and your house is already going. You run upward if you can, if you make it in time. A family from the neighboring village of Aoukhada lost everything in 7 minutes. A young father of 3 children clung to the roof of a shed, holding his youngest in his arms. The water was rising. He was screaming. No one heard. No one could reach him along the flooded paths. He survived. The house did not. The children remained alive. But what he witnessed that night cannot be described in words. And then it got worse. No one expected the cyclone to stop. Systems of this kind move. They do not linger. But this one slowed over the northwestern Sahara and kept pulling moisture from tropical Africa. 8, 9, 10 hours of unrelenting rain. In Tata Province, 740 kilometers south of Rabat, nearly 100 millimeters of rain fell. In the village of Tagunait, 280 miles from the capital, a record 99 millimeters were recorded in a single 24-hour period. That was an entire year's worth of rain falling in one day. Roads disappeared underwater. Bridges that had stood for decades could not withstand the pressure of the current and gave way. 93 roads were damaged or completely cut off across the country. 40 homes collapsed. Electricity, drinking water, and telephone communications disappeared simultaneously across several provinces. Rescue teams could not reach the affected areas. Helicopters could not take off because of visibility. Military units and civil protection forces in Algeria, where the same disaster was raging, advanced toward cut-off villages along the beds of dried-up rivers that had themselves become deadly. Algeria's Interior Minister Brahim Merad appeared on state television and described the situation in one word: catastrophic. Morocco's Interior Ministry issued a statement urging people to exercise caution, stay away from riverbeds, and remain in shelter. But many could neither read that statement nor act on it. Communications were down. In the villages of the Anti-Atlas, people faced the disaster alone, face to face with a force that no one had predicted for these places. NASA satellites recorded what was happening from orbit. In images taken on September 10th, scientists saw a picture that no researcher had expected to witness in their lifetime. The Sahara was blue. Vast expanses that in August 14th images had appeared as dead, scorched sand were now covered in water. Lake Iriqui, the famous dry lake bed in the shadow of the Anti-Atlas Mountains, filled with water for the first time in 50 years. The salt flat of Sebka El Mela in central Algeria had filled only 6 times in 21 years of observation. Now it was a lake again. Photographers captured date palms reflected in water where dry sand had lain just a week before. The image was beautiful, and behind it stood death. The final figures were brutal. 18 dead in Morocco, 5 in Algeria. Among the victims were tourists from Canada and Peru. 56 homes had collapsed. 9 people remained missing. Entire families were rescued from flooded houses only by military helicopters that managed to get airborne once the rain slightly eased. But the most devastating number was not the death toll. The most devastating number was something else entirely. These same provinces had lived through a catastrophic earthquake just 1 year before. The same villages, the same people, the same mountains. Those who had only just begun rebuilding their homes after the tremors were left without a roof over their heads once more. Only this time the roofs had been carried away by water. Professor Essam Hegyi from the University of Southern California had warned about exactly this long before it happened. His words were, "The coastal areas of all of North Africa, from Morocco to Egypt, are at the highest risk." He said this not after the catastrophe. He said it before. His words had sounded like abstraction. Now they sound like a verdict. Scientists explain the mechanism in straightforward terms. Global warming accelerates the water cycle. The hotter the atmosphere, the more moisture it holds. The more moisture in the atmosphere, the more powerful the rainfall in places that have never known rain. The desert is not becoming wetter, it is becoming dangerous. Because here water does not soak into the ground. There are no roots to hold the slopes. There are no drainage systems. There is no experience of water. Here, water kills. In the autumn of 2024, the Sahara taught the world a lesson. Not about climate, not about meteorology, about pride. About the fact that there is no place on earth that can call itself safe. No desert too dry to flood. No mountain too high for a torrent. No village so far from the ocean that water cannot find it. The people who survived in the village of Igmir returned to the ruins of their homes knee-deep in mud. They looked at the place where walls had stood, at the place where their belongings had been, their memories, their lives, and they said nothing, because some things are too large for words. The Sahara received its water, the Sahara that had waited for it for half a century, and the water killed those who had been waiting for it.